In case you missed it, here's a Sports Animal Rewind. Our Eye on the SEC is brought to you by Miller Eye Care and Optical, 694-2622.
To help us look at a team that actually hurt Tennessee in basketball and hurt Tennessee in baseball over the weekend and seems to be present. Didn't hurt Tennessee in Lady Vols softball recently when they came down here, but overall has been in the mix quite a bit recently, and they're always prominent because they rack up national championships in Tuscaloosa. We bring in, from BamaOnline.com, friend of the show, Travis Reier. Travis, Vince, and Jesse, how you doing this morning, Travis?
I am great. How are you guys?
We're good. So Alabama getting spring practice underway. It's same old with Nick Saban, right? I mean, it's just limited viewing. It's we're gonna take this each and every practice like it is incredibly important, and it's all the same, consistent as always, right?
Pretty much. Doesn't stray too far from center in terms of the rules and regulations that have been in place now for 6 years in Tuscaloosa, so don't see it changing anytime soon. The names, and I guess you could say the parts and pieces seem to change year to year, but the machine seems to roll right along.
Just how private are the practices? You know, at Tennessee, you can go up on the baseball stadium and turn around and see the field, or there are former players that get into practice and things leak out that way. Is it like that at Alabama at all?
There isn't much in the way of leakage. I can tell you, they even have a condominium complex across the street from the practice fields at Alabama, and my understanding is you have to sign sort of an agreement not to watch in on practices from up in the balconies of those things during practice times. It's pretty far-reaching in terms of the limitations, and it's not just the media, although former players are allowed into practice. I think family members are allowed in. Quote-unquote friends of the program are allowed in. But as far as the media goes, you're getting 15, maybe 20 minutes, and that's going to be about it.
Visiting with Travis Reier, talking about Alabama spring practice, which is underway, a few practices in. The early enrollees, Alabama typically is in the top part of the league in terms of number of players it gets in. It's something that they've used to their advantage for sure in years past. And there's some pretty high-profile guys in that group. Travis, talk about Derrick Henry, the QBs, and some of the high-profile players that are early enrolls that you guys are getting a glance at in spring practice.
Definitely, and Derrick Henry is a guy that's drawing some oohs and ahs, at least during the helmets and shorts portion of the practices, which is what they're in right now. But he's unlike anything they've had at running back, and they've had just about everything in the last 4 or 5 years, and even going back to years when they had Sean Alexander and Bobby Humphrey, some of those guys years past. But, not to say he's going to be that productive of a back because we just don't know. But in terms of physical attributes, he's different. There's no other way to say it. He's probably a legit 6'3", I would guess 235, 240 pounds. So he's just a big athlete. And, the reports coming out of the winter workouts were glowing for the mid-year enrollee. He apparently ran in the low 4.5s, which at his size is certainly good enough, and bench pressed right around 400 pounds and clean 350. So not bad for a guy who's supposed to be in his second semester of his senior high school year. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out with him this spring. Obviously, they know what they've got, T.J. Yeldon at the running back position, so Kenyon Drake and Derrick Henry are guys to keep your eyes on. And as far as the quarterbacks go, there are so many guys in black jerseys out there. It looks like a Pittsburgh Steelers training camp or something. There's 8 quarterbacks out there. You've got three newcomers, 2 signees, and a walk-on in Luke Del Rio. But the guy who kind of stood out to me yesterday behind A.J. McCarron was redshirt freshman Alec Morris. Looked like he's made some nice strides in the off-season program, trimmed down a little bit, looks a little more athletic. and he can really throw it. So, between those three newcomers at quarterback and Alec Morris, guys to keep an eye on in terms of A.J. McCarron's successor for 2014 and beyond.
Talking to Travis Reier from BamaOnline.com, the Alabama team side on the 24/7 Sports Network. And just like we have Ryan Callahan on from GoVols247.com each week to talk Tennessee, and we'll have Ryan on a little bit later on in the week. But we're doing that with all the other teams around the SEC with our spring previews. Travis, you're really good at that, at spotting guys that either look different from a year ago, that have developed, changed their body, things like that. Who early on, who else on the team maybe has caught your eye that might be the next wave of guys, among that next wave of guys that's next man up that could make an impact that you think has impressed you early on?
I think you have to look at the defensive line. They had a couple of three guys redshirt last year, and they look like they've benefited greatly from their first run through the fourth quarter program. Darren Lake is a guy who actually played as a true freshman on the nose, but with Jesse Williams moving on to the National Football League, between Lake and Brandon Ivory, a guy who's been around for 3 or 4 years now, it's likely going to fall to those two to try to plug that hole there on the nose. And it's interesting in a way, though, because with as many spread offenses as we're seeing now, you don't see Alabama playing with the true nose as much in the last year or so as they did early on in the Saban's tenure at UA. So, but those are some guys who've made some strides. Some of the young defensive ends, guys like Dalvin Tomlinson, who redshirted a year ago, Dakota Ball, another defensive lineman. It looks like Chris Rump, from what I understand, the position coach, really laid down the gauntlet. So, look, we were a sloppy-looking bunch a little bit last year. That's not going to happen this year. They look more streamlined, more athletic, I would say, along their defensive line this year. And they've got some production and leadership to replace there. As I mentioned, Jesse Williams, Damian Square, Quentin Dial, all moving on. So it's on these younger guys, these guys that have been around a few years, to step forward.
Travis, Tennessee's built a lot of recruiting momentum. 6 guys already committed. Ole Miss has 7 guys already committed for 2014. Alabama just 2. I mean, it's time to press the panic button down there, right?
Yeah, it's getting out of hand. I don't understand what the problem is, but they're by their standards the last few years, they're a little bit behind. But I think they're taking a more selective approach than they have perhaps in previous years, and I think they're letting some of these kids know they love them, but they've reached a point now where they can pretty much tag offers with the contingency that these guys show up for camp and work out in front of the coaching staff, which is a nice luxury to have, and kids are doing it. So, they're basically, I think, telling a lot of these guys, look, we really think you're high on our list, but we need you to come in the summer, take part in the camp, work out for us, and then we can make a final determination. Now, look, there's that top 5-10% of kids they know they want and who have committable offers, but there is a lot of guys out there that kind of fall under that other category I mentioned where, you'll see, I think, and hear more commitments for UA once camps roll around in the summer.
Travis, this relates to what you just talked about, and you may chuckle when I ask you about this, but the working of the numbers with Nick Saban in Alabama, it's always a topic of conversation around the league. And then there was those 4 high-profile players that were dismissed from the team and the university. Talk about the impact of those guys, if at all, and then also how Alabama makes those numbers work from your vantage point for our listeners.
Yeah, I think talent-wise, there was a couple of those guys that definitely could have helped the program on the field down the road, and probably even in the immediate future. When you look at DJ Petway, the defensive end, he could rush the quarterback. He was kind of a playmaker type, more of a situational guy, but, again, when we talk about spread offenses and quarterbacks like Johnny Manziel, DJ Petway is a guy who could help you in that regard. Brent Callaway was looking more and more like a special teamer type, could provide some depth on offense. A couple of young defensive guys that were just in their first year in the program, Tyler Hayes and Eddie Williams. I think they both could have helped down the road. So, on the field, it's hard to say because most of those guys hadn't made a big impact yet. But, again, I think the potential was there for some of them to be able to do it. But, you talk about the numbers, and you obviously lose those four guys. But, the situation with walk-ons now is getting to the point where they're getting scholarship caliber guys, and they're not having to pick up the tab. I mentioned Luke Del Rio, son of Jack Del Rio. He's a freshman quarterback. He was committed to Oklahoma State. They had a coaching change. He decided instead to walk on at Alabama. So that's a guy that doesn't count against their number. They pick up John Miller, a guy who spent the last 10 years playing professional baseball, committed to Stanford, signed with Stanford for football 10 years ago, a decade ago. I watched him yesterday. This guy looks like an SEC safety in terms of physical skills. He may have to eat his team, the pregame meals at Piccadilly or something. He's so old, but, he's 28, 29 years old, and this is another guy that they get as a walk-on who, again, looks to be SEC caliber, and they don't have to pick up the tab on. So in different ways, it seems like the numbers take care of themselves, and unfortunately, sometimes it's kids making dumb mistakes that help you do it.
I want to talk about this Bo Scarborough kid that Alabama has committed. He's a 6'2", 225 athlete. Now, I've seen film on him. He looks impressive at running back. He looks impressive when they split him out wide and throw him the football. Will he be the next guy in these lineage of running backs at Alabama?
It's hard to say because, here's Derrick Henry, just
right.
A true freshman. But, you still got T.J. Yeldon. He's, going to be a true sophomore this next season. But Scarborough looks to be that kind of guy, and he's similar to Henry in that there'll be some debate about what his college position should be, whether it's running back or somewhere else, maybe even on the defensive side of the ball. But, if a guy that size like Henry wants to play running back, then Alabama's one of the few places right now where they can do that because they legitimately use the big backs, and they really prefer them. So he is just, again, he's an all-around athlete, a physical specimen, and he very well could be a guy that, we talk about running backs that they have already, and then they still got, Alti Tenpenny coming in from Little Rock, Tyron Jones coming in from Atlanta, and these guys aren't even on campus yet. So it's going to be interesting to see how they sort out that situation at running back in the next year or two.
It is ridiculous, the depth of running backs at Alabama, and it just continues. Travis, we could keep you, but we'll let you go. We really appreciate your insights as always. Have a super rest of the week, sir, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
All right, that is Travis Reier. You can follow him and the coverage of Alabama in spring practice at BamaOnline.com. That is part of the 24/7 Sports Network.